here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, my friends. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. I missed you, too. I missed you, too, my beloved audience. I'd like to say Happy New Year, but this year's going to stink. Not personally. Going to have a great year personally, aren't you? But I mean, what's happening to my country? I want to thank Tom Marr for sitting in, J.D. Hayworth. I want to thank him as well. And I want to thank you folks for waiting for me. I was going to take the rest of the week off, but I decided, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do it. First of all, I want to ask you liberal Democrats a question. I'm very serious about this. Why do you hate freedom? Why do you hate private property rights? Why do you hate individual liberty? Why do you hate our Constitution? Why do you hate our Declaration of Independence? Think I'm being tough? I'm not being tough at all. I've just started. You obviously despise this society. Is there a better one somewhere? Liberals basically, or statists as I like to call them, but whatever they want to call themselves, have a totalitarian mindset. I've said this many times before. They insist on equality. I don't mean equality as a matter of justice and under the law, which is what the framers meant. I mean equality. That if you have a big car, why should you? If you have a big house, why should you? If your house has 3 bathrooms, why should you? Why should you? You don't need that. You don't need it. Who's decided that? Well, the statists, the liberals decided that. Oh, I see. And why should anybody suffer ever? Why should anybody fail ever? Well, people make decisions for which they are individually responsible. They do it all the time. But it's not fair. So these liberal statists, they reject the whole idea of our society because they reject human nature. And somehow they think man is so imperfect that we cannot govern ourselves. I'm not talking about government govern. I'm talking about put our pants on, take it off, put a dress on, take it off, feed ourselves, house ourselves, make decisions for our families about medical care, about saving. We're so imperfect, we're so flawed, we can't do it. And yet, somehow, through the electoral process, we're able to elect a relative handful of fellow Americans. We know precious little about their backgrounds, their competence, their private lives, what they say when nobody's listening. We have very little information about them. But somehow, if we call the guy a president or a vice president or a speaker of the House or majority leader or a Supreme Court justice or congressman or a senator, somehow they're more perfect than the rest of us. Somehow they not only can make decisions about our health care, they can make decisions about everybody's health care. How so? I don't know. We have a president of the United States who's chosen to never participate in the free market capitalist system. Never, ever. And yet now he rules over it. We have a president of the United States whose only success is as a demagogue, where he trashes his opponents, whether he's running for Congress or the state Senate or the U.S. Senate or President, where he lies and he deceives in a serial fashion. He gets elected, and somehow, he's qualified to run everything. He's qualified to rewrite the Constitution, like the Second Amendment. How did that happen? I don't know. I don't know. So what's going on here? Well, talk and talk and talk about tax increases on the rich. In America now, we're supposed to despise people who actually achieve the American dream. We're supposed to despise people who follow the law, who follow the rules, through hard work, through their own intelligence, maybe long hours away from their families, who invest everything they have, many of whom started at very modest means, have become successful. Now suddenly, if they don't contribute 40% of their income, and it's closer to 50% now with Obamacare and all the other rules, if they don't contribute 50% of their income to Obama, to the Senate, to the Congress, to the massive bureaucracy, somehow that's unfair. Unfair to whom? Unfair to whom? I don't know about you folks who actually pay taxes like me. Barack Obama didn't do anything to help me become who I am. Did he help you? No. And yet, like the mob, they have their hands in our pockets. They're the first ones there. So what's happened? A lot of people talk about what's happened to our country. I'm going to tell you what's happened to our country. This isn't only a financial disaster, it is a constitutional disaster. And that's the point. Once the government became unmoored, the federal government, from the federal Constitution, it's become this, an insatiable Leviathan monster. It can't stop. You heard Obama, and boy, is it getting more and more painful to listen to him. As a matter of fact, I don't even think I'm going to watch the inauguration. That's me. I can't stand it anymore. And that's how I choose to cope. You heard what he said. They got their massive tax increase. And by the way, many of you who are not earning over $400,000 a year, you're going to get whacked. As I've said over and over and over again, it's not about the rich. It's about you. You. He hasn't gotten enough, and he wants more. Why? Because this isn't about economics or balancing budgets or revenue to pay for deficit spending and printing money. There's no connection whatsoever to tax revenue and what this man's doing in the White House. No connection between what he's doing and the Democrat Party's doing and their spending. None. None. We're unmoored from the Constitution. The issue isn't what can the government do. The issue is what can't the government do. They've been pushing for this for a century. For a century. You see, folks, the only thing that stands between us and tyranny is our Constitution. And the limits it places on Barack Obama and Harry Reid and, yes, John Boehner and the Supreme Court and all the rest of them. Well, for the most part, they're gone. They're gone. Now, each and every one of us who's self-sufficient, who works for a living, and that's most of us, by the way. Most of us work for a living. Most of us are not unemployed. Most of us are self-sufficient, take care of our families, take care of ourselves, pay for the food on our table, the clothing on our back, and the roof over our heads. The vast majority of Americans still do that. Well, most of us should resent to our core what's going on around here. Obama's attacking us. He's attacking our employers. He's attacking our savings, our pensions, our health care. He's attacking our lifestyle. He's attacking our liberty and our private property rights. He's attacking our unalienable rights. No president has this power under the Constitution. No Congress has the power to do what this Congress keeps doing under the Constitution. And why am I the only one talking about this? As far as I know, They keep meeting in secret. They keep putting these big bills together, whether it's Obamacare, whether it's the stimulus, whether it is, yes, money for the Hurricane Sandy victims. And I'm going to get to that in a moment, too. Not the victims who need help, but the political hacks who use every occasion to steal money from the rest of us. This government is completely out of control. These politicians are completely out of control. This is not America. This is not a constitutional republic. It's something else. There's a professor, a law professor from Georgetown, and I'll get to him later, too. I'll get to this buffoon later, who wrote in the New York Slimes on December 30th, give up the Constitution. Well, folks, they already have. FDR rejected it. Before him, Woodrow Wilson rejected it. We've got columnists who've rejected it. We're Time Magazine, the Washington Post, the New York Times. They've all rejected it. Why? Because they think that we can have a benevolent dictatorship. That's why. I'm going to tell you the truth. When they say government is broken, they don't mean it's because politicians aren't complying with the Constitution. They mean we need authoritarianism. We need somebody to make decisions for all the rest of us. To do good. In the public interest, of course. This is what they mean to provide us. This is what they mean to bring us. This fiscal cliff discussion, what happened? The Republicans sold their soul to a president who had made Karl Marx and Saul Alinsky proud. A president who pretends to speak for the middle class and to represent the middle class while he's trying to destroy the middle class. He resents the middle class. He resents this entire society. That's why he's not done. He's going to push the envelope. Whether it's the debt limit, more spending, more government, whether it's the Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment, or for that matter, any amendment. This president means business. More when I come back.
Mark Levin.
I'm going to be very blunt about this. I've been giving it a lot of thought. What Obama deserves from us is defiance. What he deserves from Republicans in high elected office is obstruction, political sabotage. We shouldn't participate as willing partners in our own demise. And that's exactly what's going on here. This is not politics as usual. This is for all the marbles, if you will. Oh, I know there are people that say we should put a smiley face on all this. But how do you put a smiley face on Chuck Schumer's face? You can't. But if you want to smile while you do it, smile away. If you want to laugh while you do it, laugh away. Just do it. I don't care what Obama wants. I want 1.6 trillion. Who gives a damn what you want, Mr. President? Who gives a damn what Harry Reid wants? We need to advocate for and advance our agenda. It's an honest agenda. It's a righteous agenda. It's our heritage. These people are destroying our country. And what are we going to do about it? Oh, they just made a deal. Oh, and listening to the network news, how pathetic and buffoonish. Rome is burning, and they're busy reporting about the corn crop. federal spending in real dollar amounts, 2002, was $2 trillion. $2 trillion. Today it's almost $4 trillion. 2002, 19% of the gross domestic product, that is the entire economy, was spent by the federal government. Today it's almost 25%. Federal deficits in 2002, $157 billion. 2008 even, $458 billion. Well over $1 trillion every one of Obama's 4 years, almost $6 trillion. Ladies and gentlemen, he's increased the federal debt from $10.7 trillion to $16.4 trillion, over 50% in 4 years. I don't give a damn what Obama wants. But he's looking out for the middle class. How can you be looking out for the middle class when you're destroying the country? Oh, and the so-called Fiscal Cliff deal adopted this week. That's going to increase the debt by another $4 trillion over the next 10 years. Good job, Mitch McConnell, and we're going to start focusing on you, too. And I don't want any of your staffers contacting my producer. And no, I'm not going to talk to you. The total federal debt over the next 10 years is projected to be $25 trillion. 4 years ago, it was $10 trillion. The U.S. credit rating has already been downgraded, and it's going to be downgraded again. They're destroying the financial backbone of our country right in front of our eyes. And for what? For a few more weeks of unemployment? So more people can be on food stamps? So Obama can create his paradise and take money from those who actually earn it and give it to people who actually don't? Ladies and gentlemen, liberty lost. Private property lost is a high price to pay for this experiment. And it's a failed experiment. It's been tried over and over and over again. And the Republicans say, we're going to be blamed for what? Blamed for what? More on this when I return.
If you've got a telephone and you know how to use it, call Mark Levin at 877-381-3811.
Joe Biden guaranteed Mayor Thomas Menino of Boston, a leading national gun control advocate, that Obama will pass sweeping firearms reform by the end of the month. But where did this power come from? They just seized it. Doesn't come from anywhere. They seized the power. This Obama standing for the middle class and the Democrats for the middle class. You want to know what kind of stuff they stuck in that stick it to the rich bill, which sticks it to everybody, including the so-called middle class in this country? $430 million for Hollywood? Special expensing rules? Hollywood? Now, it would seem to me, maybe I'm wrong, that the average income in Hollywood far exceeds the average income in most of our blue-collar neighborhoods across America. And yet, Obama and Reid and Max Baucus and the others, they carved out a little special deal there for Hollywood. You know, those clowns that do the commercials all the time, telling working Americans how much more they should be throwing into the pot? $70 million for NASCAR by extending a 7-year cost recovery period for certain motorsports racing track facilities? $59 million for algae growers? $4 million for electric motorcycle makers? $331 million for railroads, including Amtrak? $220 million in special tax cuts and benefits, rather, for Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. How about the rest of us? Don't we deserve a little special treatment? Jim Petticoukis over at the American Enterprise Institute, he says the payroll tax increase, $125 billion in new taxes. It affects 80% of those who are employed in this country. Income tax hike and phased out exemptions will cost us $35 to $50 billion. Investment tax hike, $5 billion. And, of course, Obamacare, the Americans for Tax Reform, which is on record as supporting all of this. That's right, Grover, supporting all of it. You've lost your mind, my friend. They talk about the fiscal cliffs. On the one hand, they put out a piece on their website on December 6th talking about the fiscal cliff's hidden $1 trillion tax hike. The revenue effects of Obamacare, specifically. $1 trillion. The other hand, it's all over TV and radio endorsing it. Americans for Tax Reform, shame on you and your schizophrenia. Then we have the emergency bill to help the people who've been affected horribly by Hurricane Sandy. Now, what did they do with this bill? According to the Heritage Foundation, about half of it, half of the $60 billion, well, actually, they say about a third, $20 billion, is an actual aid package. $28 billion of the request is marked for future disaster mitigation projects. It's got stuff in there like $17 billion in community development block grants, which is nothing but a slush fund. They've got $100 million for the Head Start program. What the hell does this have to do with helping the people in New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut? Nothing. Which brings me to Pete King and Krispy Kreme. What's his face? Christie. Put him out of my mind. You know, Christie had his people record his press conference the other day, and they've been pushing it out all over the internet and the news organizations. That's why you hear about him endlessly. So apparently, Chris Christie, Mr. Conservative, and Pete King, Mr. Conservative, apparently they believe that the rest of us should pay another $30 to $40 billion in pork to get $20 billion in real aid to our brothers and sisters who we want to help in New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut. Where was Krispy Kreme when they loaded up this bill with pork? I'll tell you where he was. He was kissing Obama's butt. And where was Pete King? Pete King has voted for every big Republican spending bill down the pike. He was prepared to vote for Boehner's Part B. He voted for Boehner to be Speaker again, while trashing him yesterday. And he voted for the Obama-McConnell massive tax increase on the middle-class bill. He has no concern about how this money is raised and where it's going. The idea that a disaster bill aimed to help our fellow citizens is larded up with crap. Why the hell do we have to pay an extra $40 billion to get $20 billion to our fellow citizens, according to the Heritage Foundation? Why? The government's broken. These politicians, almost to a man and woman, suck. The President of the United States on a mission, not for the middle class, to destroy this society and resurrect it in some other form, as all great leftist radicals seek to do. By the way, the next time you hear Obama say this, because he stole it from Clinton, and these two clowns can't stop saying it, I should pay a little more in taxes. I want you to keep something in mind. The man has now spent $7 million of your hard-earned money on his Hawaiian vacation. $7 million. But more than that, we house the man. We clothe the man. Oh, yes, in addition to his salary, we help subsidize him and his family. We house them, we clothe them, we feed them, like every other president. But when he says, I can pay a little bit more in taxes, ladies and gentlemen, he's already getting a ton of freebies. He can pay a little more in taxes if he wants, but he won't. He loves being president. The plane rides, the helicopters, the free food, the free clothes, the free housing. He loves it. And then when he arrogantly says to people who earn far less than he does and who aren't subsidized by anybody that he can pay a little bit more and so should you, I'm about to vomit right on my shoes. Mark, you're a little ruffled today. You're a little sharp around the edges. You bet I am. Because I see this country being destroyed from within by hack ignoramuses, whether they put on the Democrat hat or the Republican hat at this point. It's disgusting what they're doing to this great country, this great economic system. You cannot possibly love liberty. You cannot possibly love our Constitution and the rule of law. You cannot possibly love opportunity where anybody, if they try and fail and try 10 more times, can succeed and support this agenda. There's no way. So for the 1,000th time, I want to try and help the Republicans in Washington, D.C. And by the way, the answers aren't going to come from Washington, D.C., but let me help them anyway. It doesn't matter what Obama wants. You took an oath to the Constitution. You can do arithmetic. Simple addition and subtraction will tell you that this can't continue. Stop appeasing this. Stop putting your name and casting your vote for it. Well, what can we do, Mark? Obstruct. Sabotage. Do whatever is necessary. You don't want to close the government's going to collapse. You don't want to be accused of trying to cut spending. Spending's going to be cut in a very ugly and potentially violent way, although I pray to God that doesn't happen. We're headed for a wall, or if you will, a real cliff. Don't participate in this. Start to speak out. Just tell the truth. The truth. For the truth shall set you free, as somebody once said. And it's true. So Boehner won re-election as Speaker. And I pose this question to those of you who are Republicans. Why? What has he done? We conservatives, we Tea Party activists, we constitutionalists, all the same. We made Boehner Speaker in 2010, 2011 by sending conservatives to the House of Representatives, many of whom, by the way, have turned their backs on us. But that's how Boehner became Speaker of the House. Since then, he has utterly squandered the job and his responsibilities. Utterly. He's a tactical, I'd like to say moron, but that might be disrespectful, Mr. Producer. But you know what I mean, ladies and gentlemen. After this election, he throws himself on the table, full body, and says to Obama, we surrender. Obama doesn't fear this man. Well, who would? He was crying again today. But apparently he deserved re-election as Speaker of the House because the overwhelming majority of Republicans who we all voted for him to be Speaker of the House. I can't think of one thing the man's done to advance the cause of liberty, constitutionalism, free market economics, anything. Even a coherent sentence or two or five. And same with that sidekick, Eric Cantor. And same with his sidekick, this guy McCarthy. All three need to go. But apparently they're not. You realize the House of Representatives, I'm not predicting this, the House of Representatives could go Democrat. And that'll be Boehner's fault. And the fault of all those who voted to make him Speaker. By the way, as a side point before we go to break, there's some idiot in the New York Daily News. Wrote a long piece about how conservative TV and radio is dead. I mean, the guy's a moron. But putting that aside, he throws me in with a group of people predicting that Obama would lose in a landslide. Now, I'll tell you what's interesting about that. This show is broadcast publicly. Unlike Obama and Boehner and the rest, it's not done behind closed doors. For how many months can you download the show? 2 months at a time? 3 months. Lots of people write about it, write about what I say. I have never, ever, I never predicted, ever, that Obama would lose in a landslide. Perhaps they're confusing me with other talk show hosts. I was very careful about that, wasn't I, Mr. Producer? I even said that. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm concerned we might lose, even though I felt we might win. And I also said I'm not in the prediction business. I don't know how many times I said it. But this idiot, whose name I can't recall, for the New York Daily News, who's so sure that conservative TV and radio is going to fail, apparently he doesn't listen to it. And by the way, our ratings last month, through the roof. Now, they may want me to fail, but we're not going to fail. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You know, this Joe Biden is really a disgusting, crude man. A disgusting, crude man. Spread your legs. You're going to be frisked, Mr. Producer. Did you see that? As a Vice President of the United States, I mean, we're surrounded by a bunch of munchkins, ladies and gentlemen. Spread your legs, you're going to be frisked. Oh, that's a funny one, Joe. You know what, Joe? You're a lowlife. You really are. Who talks like this? Vice President of the United States? You have no respect for the office? For the American people? And yet I'm supposed to show these people respect when they talk like this and they act like this and they do this to our country? Do liberals show us respect? Did those union bums in Wisconsin show the governor respect? Walker? What about their actions in Michigan? Was that respectful? Does that clown Hoffa Jr., does he show us respect? Or the other jerk, Trumka, does he show us respect? How about these left-wing groups? Does Sharpton show us respect? No. No, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to take the rhetorical mittens off. I want to read a little passage from Thomas Jefferson. Oh, yes. See, I like the framers, and I like the founders. A little passage. It's in Ameritopia. I put it up on my Facebook. I have a lot up on Facebook and Twitter now. I really, during my break, I just felt I needed to keep in touch with you folks. So if you haven't gone to Mark Levin's show on Facebook or Twitter, you really ought to sign up with us. There's a lot going on there, and I'm doing it, Mr. Producer, 4 in the morning, 6 in the morning, midnight. Yes, I'm awake, always awake. This is Thomas Jefferson writing to James Madison. Thomas Jefferson, as most of you know, was not at the Constitutional Convention. He was in Paris. But his dear friend James Madison tried to keep him informed about what was going on. And he was also concerned Jefferson might join the Anti-Federalists in opposing the Constitution. But in the end, Jefferson supported it. And that was very important, particularly in getting its ratification in Virginia ultimately. But that said, in a letter to James Madison, responding to his comments about the draft Constitution, in a postscript he said, "The instability of our laws is really an immense evil. I think it would be well to provide in our Constitution that there shall always be a 12-month period between the engrossing of a bill and passing it, that it should then be offered to its passage without changing a word, and that if circumstances should be thought to require a speedier passage, it should take 2/3 of both houses instead of a bare majority." Jefferson was concerned that the people wouldn't know what their representatives are doing when they're passing legislation. He said that a proposed bill should be publicly available for a full year before it's voted on, and not a single word changed. The Senate had 3 minutes to vote on this deal, and they never even read the bill. I'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Hour 2, I'm Mark Levin. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. I just feel, folks, the time has passed to keep beating ourselves up over, well, what went wrong? What went wrong? We know what went wrong. We knew 2 years ago. We knew 4 years ago. Some of us have known since we're 13, 14 years old. You keep nominating wimps, you're going to keep losing elections. But even worse, when you win elections, you lose your country. I'll tell you what I told a very good friend of mine the other day. We have to come to grips with the fact that, at least for now, the Republican Party is not a conservative party. It's just not. I'm not sure what it is. It's a lame opposition party, I guess, but it's not a conservative party. When you have the Speaker of the House purging conservatives and trying to figure out how to control the rest of the conservatives, when you have the minority leader in the Senate, McConnell, cutting an awful deal that increases the debt by $4 trillion over 10 years and massive tax increases, including for the middle class. Well, what is that? When you have these men and women who run for office, who get the positions that they want, then complaining and whining that they don't have enough power, they don't know what to do, they can't. So we know what the problem is. We know what the problems are, actually. Now, what do we do about it? When we have primary elections, we don't back everybody who Karl Rove says to back. We make our own decisions. We don't back everybody the other Bush staffers on Fox and everywhere else tell us to back. We make our own decisions. We don't allow the polls to drive us. And I don't care who's doing the polls, whether it's Rasmussen or anybody else. We don't allow those polls to make decisions for us. We have a responsibility to ourselves and our own families, not to be spun by these people. Because if we don't detach ourselves from them, this is going to continue. And I'm talking about certain websites, too. There's a preposterous editorial. I don't know who wrote it, but many good friends over there at National Review Online. That could have been worse. You'll see the same thing at much of the Weekly Standard, the same thing at the commentary website. Could have been worse. So that's the standard now. Mark, what would you do? I've talked about what I would do for the last 6-7 weeks, haven't I, Mr. Producer? By the national speech, some of the young Turks who are serious conservatives who who are articulate and confident, getting them out there speaking. I've talked about an agenda. I've talked about all these things. But it's not up to me to come up with these ideas. It's up to those who put themselves out for election, who win election, to take their public trust seriously. The election for Speaker today wasn't about John Boehner. It's about America. So why did all these Republicans vote for John Boehner? He's a weak, quote-unquote, leader. He's weak. And Mitch McConnell is demonstrating that he's weak too. We cannot have any more weak presidential nominees. The time is done. The time has run out. There's a very unpleasant matter I'm going to touch very briefly, but I can't ignore it because I'm being asked about it constantly in emails and so forth. I know Paul Ryan voted for this disastrous plan. I know he put out a statement explaining it. I read it. I cannot defend it. I cannot defend it. I don't even understand it, even having read his statement. And Paul, if you want to call in, call in. This is the man who proposed a budget that was serious, that was significant in terms of trying to begin the process of reforming some of these entitlements and cutting some of the spending. How can you propose that and yet vote for this? It's unacceptable. There are no more gimmies now, ladies and gentlemen, no more gimmies. I was proud to see Marco Rubio in the Senate say no. I was proud to see our friend Mike Lee in the Senate say no. Chuck Grassley said no. Richard Shelby of Alabama said no. Rand Paul of Kentucky said no. And that's it. 5 Republicans voted against, not even Ron Johnson. We couldn't find him. Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, the day before, was in a big huff how bad he votes for it too. 5 Republicans? It's very confusing to me. It's very, very confusing to me. We get information thrown over the transom to us by a number of these senators and their staffers from the Budget Committee. It tells us this is a disaster. And yet, how did our senator friend in the Budget Committee vote? He voted for it. Dear, dear friend of mine. My dear friend Orrin Hatch, and I love the guy. Sometimes you have to say no, guys and gals, and you have to vote no. Don't participate in this ruse, this debacle, this disaster. You all have kids. Many of you have grandchildren. They're your obligation, and we, the people, are your obligation. Obama's not done. The radical utopian statists, they're never done. The reason I timed Ameritopia for last January when we released it was to try and explain as fully as I could, using great philosophers, using awful philosophers, using the Founding Fathers, using statistics, using logic and reason, where the country was heading, from my perspective, and where we would wind up should we have these election results. If you read Chapter 1, get it at the library, I'm not hawking it. If you read Chapter 1, you'll completely understand Obama. Now, I don't get into Bill Ayers and Davis, and all. That's not it. That's part of it. But you'll understand the psychology, or the psychosis, really. You'll understand the mindset of the mastermind, the imperial mind, of the dictator mind. You'll understand it. You won't like it, but you'll understand it. You'll understand why the left is never done remaking society. You'll understand the different constituents who make up the left, the malcontents, the wealthy who already have and don't want others to get, the union bosses, the civil rights so-called movement. You'll understand all of it. And you'll understand what Obama means by fundamental transformation. That's the point of the first chapter. And then I take you through some of the classic philosophers, particularly some of their writings. You don't have to dislike the philosopher. You don't even have to dislike their books. But you can dislike what their books say. Plato's Republic. If you haven't read the Republic, you might consider it. The Ayatollah Khomeini. According to the New York Times when I was doing my research, he said that the Republic, Plato's Republic, had a big effect on him. And it certainly did. You look at Thomas More's Utopia. Thomas More, in many ways, was a hero. He's a saint in the Catholic Church. But look at his book Utopia. Many people contend that it's a fiction. Some people contend it's a non-fiction. In fact, I dug hard and I found some statements by More himself suggesting it wasn't. But it doesn't matter. If it's a fiction, it's even worse. Because people have used it, particularly communist philosophers, to justify communism. Utopia, radical egalitarianism, equality, class warfare, that sort of thing. Thomas Hobbes, who in many respects was a great philosopher. Many conservatives like him. But the Leviathan was a disaster. And in the Leviathan, he sets up a centralized, omnipresent state with a sovereign. The sovereign could be a king, it could be a dictator, it could be a democracy. And the subjects, we the people. John Locke, who was the most influential of the philosophers during the colonial period and the revolutionary period, despised Hobbes. And then there's the Communist Manifesto. Now, obviously, that came well after the founders and the framers, but that said, it's had an enormous impact on the world and an enormous impact on the politics in our own country, if we're honest with ourselves. The two classes, the bourgeois, the proletariat, subclasses, constantly at each other's throats. How you have to destroy the existing society and put in place this workers' paradise. Sound familiar? And I chose those 4 books and philosophers, so-called philosopher in the case of Marx and Engels, to explain what's going on in the country today. Again, I'm not encouraging you to buy it. I'm not. I'm talking about how this is as plain as the nose on your face. Then there was the Enlightenment. Not in chronological order, because the Enlightenment came before Marx, but that's not my point. My point is the Enlightenment. The founders drew their principles, their arguments from the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment, in a sentence, did what? It recognized the value of the individual. Not the rich, not the middle class, not this group based on skin color, not this group based on sexual activity. The individual. Whomever the individual is. The power, the value, the centrality of the individual. That's what our founders believed in. That's what your Declaration of Independence is all about. That's what your Constitution seeks to protect. And that's what's under attack. John Locke, genius. Second Treatise on Government. Charles de Montesquieu. Genius. Spirit of the laws. Relied on by our founders. They attempted to fashion a government that would respect you, the individual, including what you earn, what you acquire, your religion, your family, that would respect you. These politicians today don't respect you at all. They claim to represent you. They claim to do things for you when they're doing things to you. They want you to attack the rich because they want you to accept the power of government, to force people to bow, to change their conduct, to remake themselves. Because you're next. You're next. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Take some calls soon, but let's take this to one more level. The reason why these politicians, particularly the radical statists like Obama and the malcontents who follow him, talk about the middle class, the rich, the reason they categorize us, the reason why they define us by numbers is to dehumanize us. This is very, very important to understand. It's to dehumanize us. Among other things, to provoke jealousy and anger and so on. But I'm saying the point is, it becomes easier to pigeonhole people, to attack them, if they're not really people. So the rich. Well, who are the rich? Well, as I've said before, the rich. A rich person could be somebody who invented a life-saving drug. Well, tell me about that guy. No, he's just rich. Or it could be somebody who invented a medical device. A new hip, a new knee. Well, tell me about that. No, he's rich. She's rich. And I could go on and on. And of course, there are certain types of rich people we're supposed to like Hollywood. Hollywood is protected by the deal McConnell and Biden cut, and Obama signed with his machine, and the House voted for, including our re-elected speaker. Hollywood's protected. So Obama protects his people. He protects his constituent groups. He redistributes wealth from conservatives and Republicans and entrepreneurs to others who can help him. But that's not my point. My point is, if you dehumanize your target, if you dehumanize people, then it's easier to get people in a mob-like faction.
The Mike Levin Show. This is the home of the July 4th Americans. And you can call at 877-381-3811.
By the way, on the Drudge Report, his lead story is Boehner, and the title is Use It or Lose It. And he's holding a gavel. And he's right. Use it or lose it. Got a lot of power, Mr. Speaker. And the idiot article from the Washington Compost by Paul Kane says the Speaker is next in line to be President of the United States. No, he's not. The Vice President's next in line. The Speaker's number 3. course, they don't believe in the Constitution or any of the rest of it anyway. But that's by succession. Back to the point I was making. You see, if the politicians, if our federal government succeeds in dehumanizing us, things can get very, very ugly. And the more tyrannical a government gets, the more it, dehumanizes the people. To the point at which you can see these truly aggressive totalitarian societies where they have absolutely no love of life, except their own, the rulers. But I wanted to get to this point about what we talk about rich. We don't talk about American citizens, their accomplishments. How do these people get rich? There's no curiosity even. I'll give you an example. About 10 days ago, actually before Christmas, I saw an article in the New York Slimes, and the headline was, "Drugs aim to make several types of cancer self-destruct." I said, wow. For the first time ever, 3 pharmaceutical companies are poised to test whether new drugs can work against a wide range of cancers independently of where they originated: breast, prostate, liver, lung. The drugs go after an aberration involving a cancer gene fundamental to tumor growth. Many scientists see this as the beginning of a new genetic age in cancer research. So I looked at that. I read the rest of the article. It's fascinating. I looked at that and I said to myself, okay, 3 pharmaceutical companies. How often do we hear the politicians trashing drug companies? Relentlessly. Because they want to control them. They want to determine what their profits are. They want to be able to redistribute what they produce through government-run health care. And here they are, 3 pharmaceutical companies. And what does this demonstrate? A number of things. Number one, the private sector does a whole lot of damn things that are in the public interest and for the public good. Just because a handful of self-appointed masterminds don't dictate, processes and procedures, doesn't mean the rest of us don't contribute to the well-being of our society. We do. We do. We create wealth. We create opportunity. We create jobs. Capitalism is a noble enterprise. It creates more wealth for more people than any system on the face of the earth. It creates more cutting-edge inventions that improve the quality of life, that extend life than any other system on the face of the earth. So here we have 3 private drug companies, pharmaceutical companies, who are working on this. And why? Yes, to make a profit, because they're in existence to make money, but also to do good. They're not mutually exclusive. Then I got to thinking to myself, the rich, what would we pay these 3 companies if they actually came up with drugs to do this? Mr. Producer, isn't the sky almost a limit? If these 3 companies could figure out how to attack and destroy cancers ranging from breast cancer and prostate cancer and liver cancer and lung cancer, don't the people behind these companies deserve to be wealthy as hell? Yes, they do. They've done something nobody else or no other companies were able to do that affects our lives in an enormously positive way. See, it's not about the government redistributing wealth. It's not about the government trashing rich people, trashing businesses and corporations. They have enough. They need to have more skin in the game. They have skin in the game. You and I, we have skin in the game. The game is human life. The game is the civil society. Not funding some building in Washington. Not paying some pension or benefits for hundreds of thousands of bureaucrats. Not subsidizing the power grabs and political agenda of politicians. That's not skin in the game. The game's real life. It's society. And we all have skin in the game. So here we have people potentially, hopefully, are going to make millions, if not billions, if they solve the riddle of cancer. And yet we just throw them in the bucket. Oh, the rich. Oh, the rich over there. They're more than rich. They're great. They're assets to society. They're doing more to try and prolong life and improve life than any bunch of politicians in Washington or any state capital. Aren't they? And yet, they're corporations. Wealthy, filthy corporations. They can pay more. Don't we want companies like this spending more money trying to solve these riddles? These genetic riddles, these scientific riddles? Wouldn't we prefer more money in their hands than going to some algae project or Obama picking some solar company which goes bankrupt, that's run by his bundlers? I mean, isn't the money better spent doing this than that? And how come we never talk about this? Because they don't want us to talk about this. For them, it's all about numbers. Anybody who earns over $400,000 a year, their taxes need to go up. By the way, I read that if you earn over $1 million a year, your taxes are going to go up like $170,000. Well, let's say that person has started an enterprise and is working on something that could be hugely entertaining for so many of us. You know, that's life-fulfilling too, isn't it? Being entertained. And in the process, all the jobs it creates and wealth it creates and opportunity it creates through businesses, offshoots, and so forth. But even that aside, what's wrong with that? Oh, they're rich. They can afford more. Well, maybe they can afford more based on somebody else's notion of how they should live. 1,800 square foot home, 2 used automobiles, 5-year-old washer and dryer. But what is that? Who decides that? I hope this is making sense because I'm trying to unravel what's being done to us. We need to use our noggins. We need to use our reasoning. We need to embrace what rugged individualism used to mean. We need to embrace what Americanism used to mean. Stop telling me about the rich. What does that mean? Who are they? They're good rich people, they're bad rich people. They're good poor people, they're bad poor people. There's some poor people who are stuck in a rut. They're in that position not of their own making. There's others who don't want to work. There's some rich people who inherited a lot of money and haven't worked a day in their life, but most of them have probably worked hard. But we categorize ourselves. That's not what America's all about. We're not a class system. We're not a caste system. We never have been. And yet we're becoming one. Through the Internal Revenue Code, through government spending policies, through demagogic politicians and their propaganda. I'm not a billionaire, but I'll stand up for a billionaire. I'm not a poor person, but I'll stand up for a poor person. I'm standing up for their liberty. I'm standing up for their rights. Drugs aim to make several types of cancers self-destruct. What would we pay for that? Obamacare is not going to invent these drugs. HHS isn't going to invent these drugs. No single or group of politicians in Washington will invent these drugs. No building in Washington, the vast bureaucracy, is going to invent these drugs. None of them. None of them. As a matter of fact, none of them are going to grow any wheat or any corn. None of them. None of them are going to make any clothes that you put on your back. None of them. No. So I just mention this again because when I hear Republicans say, guess who's going to pay for this? That's right, the rich. I go, oh my Lord. Who's going to speak for individual liberty? Who's going to speak for humanity if the Republicans aren't? And they're not. Because the Republican Party today is not a conservative party. It's not. I don't know what it is, but it's not that. So there are millions of examples like this. So many that we can't even count them. Liberty and private property rights together are magnificent. They're compassionate. They're humane. They create wealth. They expand opportunity. We have zillions of examples. We never mention any. I just mentioned one. We need to reintroduce a large part of the population to freedom again. We need to unravel what's being done, at a minimum, through the use of language and argumentation. And that's something we definitely can do with the right people. And you've heard some of them speak. You've heard Ted Cruz. You've heard Marco Rubio. You've heard Sarah Palin, although I don't see her enough on Fox or these other shows. She is a national treasure that people need to get out there more. And there are others. There are many others. They can do it. They can do it. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
See, the left today, which essentially pushes for a benevolent dictatorship, that's right. And I'll reassert that. That's pretty much what the left wants, a benevolent dictatorship. Problem is they're never benevolent. And of course, only when they're in charge do they want a benevolent dictatorship. These people have never experienced a flat-out dictatorship. So they think this is a game. So they attack the foundations of our society. So their temporary politicians try to make permanent changes, with or without the consent of the people. Obama says, I won re-election. Okay, you still have to comply with the Constitution, but he doesn't think he does in every respect. An election's an election. It's not a changing of the Constitution. But they defy the Constitution. They evade the Constitution. I'm going to get into that more next hour with this professor. I think you'll want to listen. I think you'll find it interesting. Because this is the root of our problems right now. People can go in there and talk about the finances. Of course, the finances are killing us, and they're going to drag down the entire society. But the base reason for this is the abandonment of the Constitution, which sets out the blueprint for our government, which is now devouring our society, as I say. And you're going to hear people tell you, look, all we need to do is rally around a politician here and there. Well, that's good, and we ought to rally around, leaders who are actually statesmen, who can articulate conservatism. I think I've only been saying that for the 10 years I've been on radio. But it's not enough. It's the minimum. It's not enough. People talking about this being a bump in the road, and this is no bump in the road. We're going 120 miles an hour into a wall. This is just the latest episode. And one other thing I'd like you to notice when it comes to Obama and his party, they want to drag us from one crisis to the next. There was an excellent piece at National Review Online today, something I've kind of addressed in Liberty and Tyranny, which is this. You cannot have a rational government. You cannot have a representative republic that goes from crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis. The purpose of which is to work up the public, work them up into a frenzy to advance your agenda. You can't have a stable economy that way. You can't have people making investments and planning their lives that way. You hear the media reporting breathlessly, oh, it's 12 hours from the deadline, it's 12 hours from this. The regular course of governance in this society has been abandoned. We don't pass budgets in Congress anymore, going on 4 years. Even though they passed an act laying out in great detail how they're supposed to do that, they don't pass a budget. Even though the Constitution requires the president to sign it and lays out the veto requirements, he doesn't have to sign anything. He doesn't have to veto anything because they don't present him with a budget. So the entire appropriations process in this country has been intentionally destroyed. Why make a budget when you can spend recklessly without one? Without telling the people what your plans are for spending. So this is disastrous for a society. And it's also intentional. And the Republicans need to stop playing along. It's better that the Republicans leave town than vote for this stuff. I would prefer that they take a stand, propose alternatives, speak out. There are a bunch of them. But if they're not going to do that, just maybe they should go to Hawaii too, like Obama. I'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. It's already hour 3. I am Mark Levin. The number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. Sometimes we get into heavy stuff. Sometimes we have to get into philosophy and so forth. I could just sit here, and I didn't want any politicians on today. I didn't want any ex-politicians. I didn't want any columnists. I just wanted to talk to you. I want to go even further, and then I want to talk about this article by this law professor, and then we'll see if I can get some calls in here. So we have this rich guy. But let me change it. We have these rich companies. And they're working on a drug or drugs to kill multiple forms of cancer. In this New York Times article I just read to you, in part. Just to remind you, because some people come and go during the course of any radio program, for the first time ever, 3 pharmaceutical companies are poised to test whether new drugs can work against a wide range of cancers independently of where they originated: breast, prostate, liver, lung. The drugs go after an aberration involving a cancer gene fundamental to tumor growth. Many scientists see this as the beginning of a new genetic age in cancer research. What are the 3 companies? Remember, you're supposed to hate them. Merck, Roche, and Sanofi, and I apologize, I don't know how to, Sanofi, Sanofi. They're racing to develop their own versions of a drug they hope will restore a mechanism that normally makes badly damaged cells self-destruct and could potentially be used against half of all cancers. So let me ask you a question, ladies and gentlemen. And just by posing it, some might think it's controversial, but it's not intended to be. It's intended to make a point. The scientists involved in this pursuit, should they be paid more than 98% of the rest of Americans? Should they be paid more than 98% of the rest of Americans? Let me ask it this way. Would you be offended if they were in the top 1% or 2% of income earners in the country? Or let me put it this way. Are they more valuable to society than some other people? As for should they be paid more than 98% of most Americans, or should they be in the top 1 or 2%, the market will determine that. And the market, in many cases, will determine, yes, they should be. Yes, they should be. And most likely they will be. Isn't that a good thing? Isn't that a good thing? The answer is absolutely. Look what they're doing. Same with the CEOs that run these companies. Why do we care if they fly around in jets? If they're able to accomplish such wonderful things. Even pursue such wonderful goals. Right? Why should only Obama, who's destroying our economy, who's evading the Constitution, be able to take a $7 million trip to Hawaii? Why do we care if the CEOs of these companies do it? Look what they're pursuing. Something beneficial to humanity. Right? So we don't want equality when it comes to these scientists and these CEOs and other people. We don't want equality imposed on them by politicians and bureaucrats and some notion of fairness. They've earned more. They deserve more. And we're prepared to pay them more. See the point? Well, most of you do. So I just want to underscore this. And that they bring more value to society. More value to society. The quote-unquote public interest, the public good, than these politicians who raise taxes, who spend us into oblivion, who keep moving around the deck chairs on the Titanic that they've created. These people do more to contribute to this society than any politicians. Now let me broaden it. You folks out there who work for a living, who put in a full day's work for an honest paycheck, or who are starting your own little entrepreneurial businesses and so forth, you contribute more to this society than any politician or group of politicians. And should you be rewarded for your hard work, whether intellectual or physical or both, because of something you've created, something you've done, some niche you've filled, that's a good thing because you're improving society. And even if you're not improving society as a whole, you're improving the lives of individuals who want your products and services. And this is what's being smothered. This is what's being destroyed with class warfare, with massive government intervention and regulations and spending. Humanity. The civil society. That's my point. All right, now I want to get to the Constitution quickly, although I could do this all day, but I don't want to bore everybody. Some people think that just because they reference the Constitution or read a sentence out of the Constitution or talk about the founders and the framers and so forth, that this passes for serious constitutional discussion. It doesn't. This New York Times op-ed by Professor Louis Michael Seidman at Georgetown University, professor of constitutional law, says he has a forthcoming book on constitutional disobedience. I mean, honestly, what an idiot. But that said, here's how his piece starts. As the nation teeters at the edge of fiscal chaos, observers are reaching the conclusion that the American system of government is broken. But almost no one blames the culprit, our insistence on obedience to the Constitution with all its archaic, idiosyncratic, and downright evil provisions. Consider, for example, this is a constitutional professor who's written a constitutional textbook. You wonder why all these leftist nut-job lawyers are graduated out of these schools? Well, because they have professors of the same. Consider, for example, the assertion by the Senate Minority Leader, that would be McConnell, last week that the House could not take up a plan by Senate Democrats to extend tax cuts on households making $250,000 or less because the Constitution requires that revenue measures originate in the lower chamber. Why should anyone care, says the good professor? Why should a lame duck House, 27 members of which were defeated for re-election, have a stranglehold on our economy? Why does a grotesquely malapportioned Senate get to decide the nation's fate? So in other words, the whole thing is a disaster. By the way, I'll answer that specific question. Mr. Law Professor, who's been teaching constitutional law for 40 years, just read the ratification debates. The reason why they wanted these tax and spending bills to come out of the House of Representatives is because the House of Representatives, every single member is up for re-election or election every 2 years. And so the will of the people is most directly effectuated in the House of Representatives, or manifested in the House of Representatives. Senators are up every 6 years, 1/3 of the body, every 2 years, and of course the president is elected for 4-year terms. That's why. Genius. And what about the lame duck session, he asks? Why should they have so much power? Well, this is bizarre. Are we to swear in newly elected members immediately? The lame duck is in existence for 5, 6, 7 weeks. But the bigger problem isn't that there's a lame duck session. The problem is that the politicians in Washington, and unfortunately many who are judges around the country, they don't follow the Constitution. Or they wouldn't have so many problems to deal with. Now, would they? But he says, why follow this? And of course, I could pose some questions to this professor. Well, what parts of the Constitution should we ignore? What parts of the Constitution should we rewrite? How about the Bill of Rights? You have a problem with that? Just the Second Amendment, just the takings clause that protects property rights, that's the 9th and 10th Amendments. We should do away with that. Part of the First Amendment, religious liberty. I also don't like that freedom of association part. We got to get rid of parts of the Bill of Rights, right, Professor? Or should we get rid of all of it? How about the 14th Amendment? What about the 13th, the 15th? Should they go too? Why don't you tell us? Maybe your book tells us. But honestly, who gives a crap what you think? Just another dingbat who plays professor, destroying one generation after another of lawyers. But this is the mentality, ladies and gentlemen. This has been going on for 100 years. He says our obsession with the Constitution has saddled us with a dysfunctional political system. See, he's got it backwards. We have a dysfunctional political system because it doesn't comply with the Constitution. You big dummy. He says it keeps us from debating the merits of divisive issues and inflamed our public discourse. Instead of arguing about what is to be done, we argue about what James Madison might have wanted done 225 years ago. Really? Is that what Harry Reid does? Really? Is that what Biden and Obama do? They're worried about what Madison thought and thinks. Is that what they do? Can you imagine this guy on the Supreme Court? What a reckless justice he would be. And Professor, what about the oath of office these people take to faithfully execute, to uphold the Constitution? I guess we'd have to get rid of that. So what do we replace it with? What do we replace it with? I'm sure he has many ideas. He says, what has preserved our political stability is not a poetic piece of parchment, but entrenched institutions and habits of thought, and most important, the sense that we're one nation and must work out our differences. Really, really, is that what we think when it comes to Obama and Pelosi and Reid? What do you do when politicians are trying to destroy our institutions and traditions, Professor, like the current president and his party? He says no one can predict in detail what our system of government would look like if we freed ourselves from the shackles of constitutional obligation. And I harbor no illusions that any of this will happen soon. But even if we can't kick our constitutional law addiction, we can soften the habit. We have softened the habit. We're living in a post-constitutional period. But you see, it's never enough. Not for this professor. Not for the Democrat Party as it is today, not for the President of the United States. Not until they have an iron fist to impose their will willy-nilly will it be enough. And then it's too late. And then professors like this would say, that's not what I meant. But that's what you've done. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
All right, it's been a while. I should take some calls, I think. Let us go to... Boom, 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 boom. Chris in Massachusetts, the great WGAW. Now, the mayor of Boston, while I have you, is a gun control nut, number one. Number two, Brown, Scott Brown, he wants to be a senator again. He's become a gun control nut. You know, when you read the ratification debate, Massachusetts participation, as a matter of fact, boy, I'll tell you, it's like night and day. Massachusetts was the beacon. I mean, John Adams, Sam Adams, and on and on and on. And fighting over not enough liberty, not enough individual freedom, and so forth. And now we have, it's not just Massachusetts, the whole damn New England. I don't know what the hell's wrong. I mean, you know, the region of the country with the Yankees. And yet, This is where we are. But I don't need to tell you that, Chris. You're living it. Go right ahead.
Yes, well, Mark, first of all, absolute pleasure to speak with you. I'm a surgeon in training, so I listen to you at night when I'm not in the operating room, of course. And
wow,
it's kind of a guiding light for me the last couple months.
Are you a general surgeon or?
General surgeon in training, yes. Yeah, I'm a resident, actually.
That's wonderful. Good luck to you.
Yeah, well, with the Affordable Care Act, we'll see what the hell's going to happen. But yeah, I was listening to you about the profits, and I'm also starting a medical device company on the side. And so I've sat here trying to raise capital and actually build the device and do clinical trials, and watching both the Affordable Care Act start to roll over the healthcare system, and then really just be demonized in terms of trying to figure out how to get a company off the ground. And I think if people really realize how challenging this actually was, both to train and become a specialist in something like surgery, even any of the medical fields, but then also to start a company and actually put capital at risk, put your reputation at risk, actually put the thing through trials to make it safe and actually demonstrate efficacy. I think, you know, when they start chipping away at profits and what have you, I don't think they realize what's going to happen to the innovation in this country if we keep going the way we're going. I'm already having a tough time getting this company. I've been working on it for 6 years.
And you shouldn't have to be working on it for 6 years, and most of your problems dealing with that state government, with the federal government. I'm going to tell you something. The fact is that Obama, Reid, all these people, they'll get whatever care they need from where they need to get it, whatever medicines they need. It's us plebes. We're the ones who are going to suffer. And, you know, a guy like you trying to start a business, I mean, it's hard enough to actually start a business without all the government interference and all the instability.
Well, absolutely. And I'm actually driving into a shift to nights and moonlight so I can actually pay for the startup cost of this company. And so I'm pulling night shifts and doing work during the day and what have you. It's been very challenging. And just watching my tax rates now probably going to go up to some extent, and watching them.
But Chris, here's the point. I want to use you as a Beautiful example. You have skin in the game. You're helping people. You're trying to start a business, to help more people, to make profits, to hire people, to invest your money. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to do as an American citizen, and yet, you're under attack. Thank you for your call, my friend. And yet, if he was on unemployment, I'm supposed to feel sorry for him. I'll be right back.
If you're trying to reach Mark on the air, call him at 877-381-3811. The Mark Levin Radio Show continues.
Our buddy Ted Cruz is already starting to make some noises, a little bit of a difference. There's a piece up here on Drudge, CBS Houston, Tea Party darling Ted Cruz. By the way, do they ever talk about the left, like the ACLU darling Tom Harkin? No. Do they ever do that? Or like, I'm just saying, the way they try and pigeonhole our statesmen, in order to limit their influence. But the media are pathetic, disgusting. Ted Cruz has been sworn in as U.S. Senator and says his first order of business will be introducing a bill he knows will never pass. He didn't say it will never pass. It won't pass now. Cruz is a Cuban-American and former state solicitor general. On Thursday, he became the first Hispanic to represent Texas in the Senate. He's pledged that his first bill would seek to repeal every syllable of every word of the Obama administration's health care reform law. Now in office, Cruz said he'll keep that promise even though he knows Senate Democrats and Obama will ensure his bill won't become law. Well, why is he doing that? Because, like the liberals who keep chipping away and chipping away and chipping away, we've got to be in this fight and chip away and chip away and chip away too. We cannot accept forever Obamacare or anything else they ram down our throats. And then my buddy Brian over at Right Scoop, he tells me that after Ted Cruz said he would have voted against the Fiscal Cliff deal, Wolf Blitzer told Cruz that he needs to accept the reality, in so many words, that Obama and Harry Reid won and that he can't be overly idealistic, but that he needs to compromise and to be concessionary. Who the hell is Wolf Blitzer? First of all, whoever his barber is ought to be fired from the International School of Barbers or whatever they call it. But that said, hey, Wolf Blitzer, I have an idea. Shut up, you idiot. Why don't you give advice to the liberal nut jobs, Wolf? They're all your friends anyway. Keep at it, Ted. Stay strong. Don't let them wear you down. I know you won't. All right. Let's continue, shall we? Let us go to John, San Francisco, the great KSFO. Go.
Yeah, hi, Mark. I just wanted to tell you, the soft tyranny that you've written about, I think it's already taken hold. And I think the way that it's taken hold is through the political theater of taxing the rich. They have won, and I don't know anybody who talks about it with any intellect without somebody's face glazing over about the $1 trillion that we're spending every year that we're not even taxed for. That money is being raised by printing press. The Federal Reserve is monetizing the debt by buying 80% of that debt, and nobody understands that. And it doesn't matter.
All right, John, what you say is true. Now, there's 2 points I want to make, because you're an intelligent guy, and you made excellent point. There's 2 points I want to make in response. Number one, we have allowed the left to make the destruction of our economy painless, so that the only people who suffer are the people who are productive. The people who are on the public dole, who are the recipients of the benefits of the welfare state, They don't feel anything. We've extended unemployment. Oh, we have to do that. And we're going to make sure everybody's covered with health care. Oh, we have to do that. So they're not feeling anything. As a matter of fact, they're being told by Obama and the Democrat Party that they're first-class citizens, and that surgeon who called and the rest of them, we're second-class citizens. So they're being held up as the people for whom you and I should be conferring our wealth, upon whom we should be conferring our wealth, and that our society exists for them. That's number one. So that has to change, and it'll change, but it may change when it's too late, because those folks are going to be in for a rude awakening when the welfare state finishes its collapsing. That's number one. Number two, we cannot define our objectives, our strategies, based on the lowest common denominator in this society. John, put them up. I want to have a conversation with them. We cannot define what we have to do and what we must do based on them. I have called them drones. Other people call them other names. But for years I have said the drones have to be written off. We can't get to them. They don't want to be gotten to for 1,000 different reasons. But there are other people we can get to. But even so, we have to advance our agenda, and we have to figure out ways to do it, because the left's agenda is not that popular when it's actually exposed. We have to get better at using the language, which is why I've spent the entire show doing it. We have to find better people to run for public office, better leaders. And we have to accept the fact that today's Republican Party is not a conservative party, and that all the answers for revitalizing this society, for reestablishing our Constitution, aren't going to be found in Washington. I have a lot of ideas on this, and I'm going to be talking about them in about 5, 6, 7, 8 months as I work them through. But go ahead, John.
Mark, I think that the drones are now the middle class, and the reason that I say that is they say that our taxes haven't been raised, but the taxes have been raised by destroying the currency. My wages have dropped 15% over the past
I know, but I want to address
years.
your first point. You say the middle class. I use that language in order to address that language, but let me tell you something. We had 57 million people who did not vote for Barack Obama. Those aren't all millionaires and billionaires. Those aren't all poor people. The so-called middle class in this country, for the most part, not all of it and not enough of it, didn't vote for Obama. But that's not my point. Reagan didn't sit there. Churchill didn't sit there. Washington didn't sit there and say, look, I can't get the middle class. What they said was, this is our agenda. This is who we are. This is their agenda. This is who they are. This is why we want to be victorious in an election. This is why we want to implement our agenda. This is what they're doing to our country. This is what their agenda is doing to our country. Don't get caught up in the classes and the castes, because truth be told, there aren't any.
But Mark, my point was, we've become the drones.
Your point is you want to surrender, and I'm telling you I'm not prepared to.
No, I don't want to surrender.
Well, all you're telling me is that they're printing money, they're borrowing. You're telling me everything we already know.
No, but what nobody talks about is everything has inflated to the point that they're taxing our money, and this is all political theater about the rich. I don't think taxes should go up, period, on anybody.
Oh, nobody's talking about that. I've been talking about that, Mr. Producer, for how long now?
No.
Hold on, slow down, John. Been talking about the printing of money, talking about the coming inflation. So what?
Well, but nobody's listening. I mean, you have your listeners.
All right, thanks for your call. I don't know how to answer a guy like this. Should I go door to door? Would that do it? Should I beseech people who won't listen to me? And beseech them until they shut the door on my foot? Let me tell you something, John, and a lot of folks out there who are on our side. If you thought this was going to be easy, you were wrong. If you thought this is going to be handed to us, you're wrong. Liberty is always threatened by tyranny. It comes in different forms, it has different faces, and it also comes from within. And that's the most dangerous form. It's the most dangerous form. because we're a nation divided from within. And we have politicians who want it that way, who keep dividing us based on 100 different reasons. I get it. I know it. And so does everybody listening to this program. So we can wring our hands to a point. That's fine. But then what? But then what? Nobody's talking about it. We're all talking about it till we're all blue in the face. And I don't know how many more times we have to analyze it. Well, let me summarize it in 60 seconds or so. We have a Federal Reserve that's out of control, that's printing money, that's going to harm this society with huge inflation at some point. That paper all comes back home at some point. And they're printing that money to help disguise the fiscal disaster that is Obama and the Democrats and, quite frankly, too many Republicans. The Federal Reserve is making the fiscal spending possible because it's putting its thumb on interest rates, which at this point, I promise you, ladies and gentlemen, wouldn't be 1 or 2% or 3%, given the amount of money that's being spent and the amount of money that's being borrowed, and particularly the amount of money that's being printed. That's his point. I get his point. We've talked about that point. Number two, too many people in this society are benefiting from what's going on, which is absolutely a fiction. This isn't reality. We're not living in reality yet. Reality is going to be extremely painful, and it's going to punch us all right in the nose, including them. But they're being protected. So we have these trillions and trillions of dollars in debt, and we extend unemployment insurance. What are we paying it with? Nothing. Paper, borrowed money, whatever, but really nothing. Increased food stamps. What are we paying it? Nothing. So, of course, I keep saying the welfare state is expanding and collapsing at the same time. I've written about this. Mark Stein's written about this. Many people have written about this. People are still writing about this. You can't miss it. You can't miss it. But part of the problem is, and I strongly believe this, is that too many in our society are not experiencing this. They're being protected. You can't pay your mortgage, it's the fault of the banks. So we'll punish the banks, and we have a program for you. Right? You have too many kids. That is, kids you can't pay for, kids you can't subsidize. Don't worry, somebody else will subsidize it. Go ahead, have kids with 3 different people. Go ahead. We'll even give you a tax credit. How about that? Our federal government will subsidize this behavior. So, you don't feel it in many respects. And I can go on and on. You want contraceptives? We'll pay for your contraceptives. Whatever you need. So when we talk about, his point is, and I've talked about it, that here we are going into fiscal hell, over $1 trillion every year in a deficit, massive debt, massive inflation over the horizon, and all these people are being subsidized, they don't feel it. And then he says, but the middle class too. Well, I don't get into this class stuff. But his point is that too many people don't feel it because too many people are being protected by it, from it. But the government won't be able to do that forever. That's true. That's true. Now, what do we do about it? Well, we're going to do everything we can about it. The things that I've talked about, things that we'll talk about in the months ahead. But that doesn't mean we're going to survive it. One of the things I say in the epilogue of Meritopia is, no society is guaranteed perpetual existence. Ben Franklin knew it on the closing day of the Constitutional Convention, and he warned about it. Lincoln warned about it. Reagan warned about it. Justice Story warned about it. Anybody who can think this stuff through knows it to be true. That's why we're so upset. That's why we're so concerned. And that's why we're so disgusted with Boehner and McConnell and hapless, impotent Republicans who keep throwing up their hands and yet ask us for their votes. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Glad to be back. Thank you for joining us. I'll be back tomorrow. I just want to make the point that one of the reasons I love you, my beloved audience, is you don't give up. You love this country. You want to see us succeed. And even in little ways. You know, when you talk to people in your neighborhood, at the grocery store, at the pharmacy, when you talk to people at work, family members, friends, whomever, you can make a big difference. And again, I wrote about this in Liberty and Tyranny. There are tens of millions of us. You know, we lost an election by, 3.5, 4 million votes? I don't know. Well, we have to work harder. We have to get better candidates. We have to hold their feet to the fire. There is no magic answer. This is hard stuff. It's hard to watch the most magnificent country on the face of the earth being turned into what Obama's doing. It's hard to watch the once great Democrat Party turn into a party that promotes, in many respects, a totalitarian mindset. It's scary in some ways. It's hard to know that there are professors and journalists and columnists and even elected politicians who flat out reject the Constitution. It's hard to see all this. And we're going to have incredible battles ahead. Joe Biden has promised the mayor of Boston by the end of this month they're going to pass gun control legislation. People support that. They don't even know what they're talking about. They don't know anything about guns. They don't know anything about the Second Amendment. But that's their problem. We do, and we need to fight this. We need to draw lines in the sand and mean it. We do not have to participate in this. And the people we elect damn well better not participate in this. A loyal opposition to what is a disloyal, in many respects, party, disloyal to the Constitution, is unacceptable. And I know I'm going to be attacked for some of these straightforward comments I've made today, but I don't really care. It's time to speak out and speak up. It's time to stand up, be counted. So no, there's no one easy way to deal with this. But if millions of us continue to speak out, continue to make demands, reject what Obama has to say, reject what his party has become, we can only hope that it'll make a difference at some point. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a great honor. I want to salute each and every one of you. God bless you, and I'll see you tomorrow, America. I'm Mark Levin.